Phone died. So these ambassadors, they hear Alcibiades. He says, so you guys have jurisdiction, right, to make these calls, and the ambassadors, they think, oh yeah, that's the cue, right, to sort of downplay it, right, that they don't really have jurisdiction, so that they don't get weaseled out of something that they don't really want to agree to, and the rest of Sparta is not going to agree to. Okay, so they're like, oh yeah, that's right. Oh yeah, we gotta say we don't really we don't have the jurisdiction. So they say, we don't have the jurisdiction. We're not the real guys. Whatever. And Alcibiades is like, what? This is an outrage. The Spartans are bullshitting us. They're sending guys that have no right to make these promises that they told you guys yesterday. This is stupid. Get them the fuck out of here. And they believe Alcibiades. The ambassador's like, what the? They don't know what's going on. They don't know that they just got played. They didn't know that Alcibiades was just doing this to, like, stir shit. Okay? Because Alcibiades has an idea. Right? Alcibiades wants fame and glory for himself. Not for Athens, for himself. He has no loyalty to anybody. This guy only cares about fulfilling his own desires. So, eventually the peace of Nicias is ended with the Spartans, and they're back in. And to add on to that, now that Alcibiades is a great war hero with decorations, he says, you know what? You guys really ought to make me general. So they do. Because he's got looks, wealth, and status. And now he's a decorated war hero. Which was actually Socrates, right? So they agree to make him general. Him and one other guy. Nicias is also a general. But what Alcibiades proposes is that, you know what we also ought to do while we're at it, while we're here, while we're at war, what we also ought to do is go take over Sicily, which is a nation that's far greater, far bigger than Athens, with a much larger military force. This is a retarded military move, because not only are they starting shit where they have no business to be starting it, which some of that is like they don't know how, they have no reason to really know how big of a force the Sicilians have. Their information on how big of a nation it is probably unreliable because they don't have Google Earth back then. Okay, so anyhow, they decide to go on the Sicilian Expedition. And but before they do that, somehow they agree to this. They're splitting up their forces, by the way, which is a complete retarded idea, right? We're going to, not only do we have our hands full with the Spartans, while we're at it, though, we'll just divide half of our forces and go fight some greater army. This is stupid. But it's all fueled on by just ambition and Greek hubris and Alcibiades, who has a lot of those things. This is also why Socrates hates a democracy, because it can easily be turned to making ridiculous decisions based off of what sounds good, right? Like he makes Socrates, or Plato makes a reference to like the art of rhetoric, or the sophists are like a baker. But what he means by that is like somebody that makes pastries or like candies, and pretending to be a doctor. It's like going up to a child, which would be the population of Athens, and saying, "Would you like this nice candy?" Okay, do you want to go invade Sicily and be great? or Socrates saying, no, we shouldn't even be fighting the Spartans right now. Why did we end the peace agreement? We should have never started this to begin with. That's Socrates being the doctor saying, we need to give you this shot, versus the other doctor, but who's really the baker, the sophist, who's saying, would you like this candy? Who do you think the kid's going to choose? The guy with the candy, not the guy with the shot, even though the shot might be the right thing for him, right? So Socrates and, Plato has a huge bone to pick with democracy. Anyway, so they go on the Sicilian expedition, but before they ship out, the night before, there's a big party that Alcibiades has, where him and the boys go out and get plastered, and they defame or they deface certain statues of gods in the city, household gods, and they allegedly perform blasphemous rites. So they use like the ceremonial clothes and all that stuff, and they do like a mock ritual with it, which is like super disrespectful, whatever. So in the morning, everybody gets up and sees that the there was statues of Hermes, and I believe they defaced it. They did something vulgar, they drew a dick on him or something, and so it's very disrespectful. But Alcibiades does whatever he wants. He gets away with it every time. So at this point, he's done enough stupid shit that I can't remember who wrote this. It was some poet, either Euripides or maybe it was a comic poet. I forget, but he wrote that that the Athenian people love Alcibiades, and they hate him, and they can't live without him. Okay, so they're in a bit of a predicament. There's a lot of people that don't like Alcibiades because of how much of a loose cannon he is. And then there's a whole lot of guys that just want to get in his pants. And then there's a whole lot of guys that want to get in his pants and are lulled by his ability to make good speeches. And he's very charismatic. Right, so he wears purple robes, which apparently was a very feminine thing to do, and he had like a hammock bed, which apparently was pretty gay as well. This guy is a fruitcake. All right, he's crazy, but so they're trying to nail him on this, on defacing the gods and doing this very disrespectful thing. But they're just about to head out, right? So they let him. I guess they let him go, and they go off and fight in Sicily. And at a certain point, they end up calling him. Apparently, the charges were kind of like iffy as far as like true like witnesses. There were some people that kind of talked out on him, that were given some like sus information, like how did you know it was him? It was like, well, I saw him by the moonlight. Oh, well, the moon was like, there would have been no way that he could have seen the moon based off the moon phase, something like that, so that there's like sort of some iffy a bit of a dubious claim, because he had enemies. All right, he for sure had enemies, but he also had plenty of people that love him. That's why he was able to get away with so much crap. Anyhow, so goes on the Sicilian expedition. They end up calling him back and say, well, while he's gone, they basically convict him. Enough people are pissed off that they say, we gotta kill this guy. We just gotta kill him. Right? Another thing, I gotta throw this quote in there too. I forget who wrote this as well. I wish I had sources for this, but this was probably. I wish I could remember. Anyways, he said about Alcibiades, like in reference to Alcibiades, is like, you shouldn't have raise a lion in your city. 'Tis not right. But if you do, you should treat him as a lion. Basically, is saying Alcibiades is definitely like you shouldn't try to make an Alcibiades character. These guys are very destructive. I gotta have my Ted Kaczynski. These guys are very destructive to culture, but like the other poet said, the people love him and they hate him and they can't live without him. So if you do have a lion in your society, the least you can do is treat him like a lion. And unfortunately, he was not treated like a lion enough. And so they call him back from the Sicilian Expedition and say, you're convicted at this point. We're got to put you to death. And Alcibiades is not going to go back on honor that his city needs to enact justice on him, right? So what does he do? He defects, and he goes to the Spartans and integrates into Spartan culture fully. All right, at least according to Plutarch, the guy went from being fagged up to integrating into Spartan culture. All right, these guys are hard asses. All right, they shower cold. They're taking cold showers. They're like Jocko Willink over there. It's crazy. All right, they're not gonna put up with any of that purple robe bullshit. You gotta be a fucking man. All right, according to Spartan culture, Alcibiades is not a resident, but he integrates. Plutarch writes that he has an insane ability to be a social chameleon. So he integrates with, and some of it is political. All right, don't get me wrong, because they know that this guy's a top dude in Athenian, with Athens. So they know that he can give them information, and that's exactly what he does. He goes to, he defects to help the Spartans, and gives them a ton of information on like what's going on militarily and like where their the Athenian weak points are. The guy's a total traitor. But while the military ephor of Sparta is away in battle for 9-10 months, he's gone. A military ephor is like a high magistrate. He's a high position guy in the Spartan culture. While he's gone for 10 months, guess what Alcibiades does? Insane guy. He knocks up this top guy's wife. You don't do that. Nobody would even be crazy enough to do that. He goes and sleeps with the top guy's wife and gets her pregnant. She's pregnant. And the guy comes back after 10 months, sees that his wife has given birth, and he says, the math does not add up on this pregnancy. I've been gone long enough that this doesn't make any sense. Who's been doing this? Alcibiades. Insane guy. So they, needless to say, they're not putting up with that. So what does Alcibiades do? Defects again. Who does he go to this time? He goes to the Persians. All right, the Persians have been kicking around in the Hellenic world, fucking shit up from before the Peloponnesian War. That's why they're partially responsible for why Athens gets so rich, is because the Persians were attacking the Hellenic world, and the Athenians were a big part of defense against the Persians. So the Athenians end up setting up this thing called the Delian League, I believe it was called. It's like a League of Nations for the Athenian city-states. And what it essentially is that every year you send men in arms and like in ships to the island of Delos. I think I could be getting this information wrong, so don't take my word. I'm just bullshitting here. I'm drinking a Coors Banquet. I'm a retard too. And so people are sending in ships with their men for like a defense or an organized defense against the Persians in case they come back. Because, there's the big battle. You remember like 300, the Battle of Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans beat off like thousands of Persians. That was what was going on before the Peloponnesian War. So they set up the Delian League. Every city-state pays tribute in ships and men every year to the defense contribution to defense, right? Well, the Persians haven't showed up in a quite a long time, and these city-states are tired of sending off their military equipment and their men for no reason, because nobody's getting attacked. So what Athens says is, instead of sending your men, what you could send is just money. So ships full of treasure, gold. They didn't have they didn't have USD back then, obviously. So they're sending in gold, they're sending in all kinds of things. What this does is get Athens completely rich. And so they're growing in power, and they don't have a theory of economics, so they confuse that. Why are we so on top of shit right now? I don't know. It must be because we're so fucking great. What happens is they're rich enough to not have to worry about getting attacked all the time. They have walls. They have a great port, a great trade port, Piraeus, and lots of sea access, and they're at the height of culture. They have the sophists. They have the pre-Socratic physicists, right? They're thinking about like Democritus with like the atom. I think it was Democritus. Heraclitus. These are like philosophers before philosopher was a term, okay? That's why they call them pre-Socratics, because when Socrates comes along, he really champions philosophy. But the guys that came before him, they were coming up with some crazy shit too, right? Because they have access to other cultures. They're in pre-Socratic times, their system of thinking about the world was in Homeric terms, mythology, right? So their way of explaining the world had to do with gods and mythology, right? And all the stories that come along with that. So they think that the sun is Apollo's golden chariot racing across the sky all the time. And he's the god of truth, and if you tell lies, he's going to shoot you with his golden arrows out of his chariot, right? Or he's going to tell Zeus, and Zeus is going to hit you with lightning. What they find out through interacting with other cultures is that all these other cultures have similar myths, but if they're not similar, what is similar is that all these cultures' myths are catered to their culture. and all their gods are just like them. So the traders from Africa, the black guys, have black gods. The guys with red hair have their gods have red hair. Now that I think of it, all of our gods are kind of like us. So that really gets they're scratching their noggin on that. And they really think about it, and they start to think about nature. What is nature? What is the sun? You know, it doesn't really look like a golden chariot. And there are plenty of times when I've told lies and I didn't get struck with arrows. So maybe something else is going on here. They develop a primitive but early and developmental stage of science. So Athens has culture, the greatest culture of all the Hellenic world, and they have this new science. They have medicine, you know, Hippocrates, the Hippocratic method. Doctors today still take the Hippocratic oath, right? I believe. I could be wrong about that, but, you know, first rule, do no harm. Hippocrates, they have medicine, they have science, they have culture. These guys are on top of the world. And they're bloody rich. They're bloody rich! So, they misconstrued this fact for them just being the greatest people to ever live, right? And that goes to show why they're able to make such brainlet takes of like, we should not only go to war with the Spartans to defeat the Spartans and become the most powerful, because we already know we're great. We can clearly beat the Spartans. And not only that, but we can divide our units to go fight Sicily. And characters like Alcibiades can run around because we don't really care about what's the best. What we care about is great speeches and hot guys. So that went on a tangent, and this video is very long, but that's Alcibiades, and that's the Peloponnesian War.